The young gorilla, Koko, sat alone, his small, powerful arms wrapped around his knees, dark, intelligent eyes scanning the dense foliage at the edge of his enclosure. Other juvenile gorillas chattered playfully and swung from sturdy branches, but Koko remained still, a somber stillness that spoke volumes. Zoo's staff had exhausted every known method to coax him back into his playful ways, but since his mother's unexpected separation weeks ago, he had barely stirred, his vibrant energy seemingly extinguished. Visitors bustled past, oblivious to the profound grief beneath that thick, dark fur, and no one, absolutely no one, anticipated the extraordinary turn of events about to unfold. It was a bustling mid-morning, the zoo alive with the cacophony of a local school field trip. Children in their bright, matching t-shirts darted excitedly between exhibits, their laughter and shouts echoing, tiny hands tugging at their teachers' sleeves, eager for the next discovery. One small boy, noticeably quieter than the boisterous crowd, lagged behind. His wide, observant blue eyes followed the gorilla's movements with a quiet, almost reverent wonder. He lingered near the primate nursery service area, lost in thought, while his group began to shift towards the snack pavilion, their voices fading into the background. Then, his gaze caught on something. A side gate near the rear observation deck, tucked away from the main thoroughfare, stood slightly ajar. It was an oversight, most likely left that way during the early morning maintenance routine, a careless mistake in the rush. There were no blaring alarms, no watchful guards visible, just enough of an inviting gap to irresistibly draw a profoundly curious mind. He glanced quickly over his shoulder at the receding figures of the chaperones. No one, absolutely no one, appeared to notice his silent contemplation. Without uttering a single word, with the quiet grace of a shadow, he slipped through the narrow opening. The air around him shifted immediately, becoming noticeably damp and carrying the distinct, earthy scent of dense vegetation. He found himself in a narrow, winding passage, flanked by low, moss-covered stone walls. Through a wide, arching opening just ahead, a lush, sprawling enclosure stretched into view, vibrant and untamed. Towering trees, thick, interwoven ropes, and sprawling patches of tall, emerald-green grass filled the space. And there, sitting with an almost regal stillness on a mossy, ancient-looking log near the very center of this verdant world, was the small gorilla. Koko slowly lifted his head. Their eyes met, a profound, unbroken connection forming across the damp, silent space. No movement, no sound disturbed the heavy air. The boy stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, his worn sneakers crunching softly over the scattered gravel. Rain from the night before still pooled in shimmering puddles on the dark, rich dirt. The gorilla rose to his feet, not with an ounce of fear or aggression, but with a palpable sense of curiosity. His head tilted, observing the small human, and his lips twitched, forming something that was almost, uncannily, like recognition. Then, an event transpired that defied all expectation, all logic. He walked, with an unwavering gait, straight toward the boy. Behind the reinforced glass of the main observation room, a lone volunteer on patrol, distracted by a clipboard of daily logs, suddenly looked up. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then her mouth opened in a silent, horrified scream as she fumbled frantically for her radio, her fingers trembling. "We've got a child in the enclosure. I repeat, a child inside the gorilla sanctuary." The words, though whispered, crackled with urgency through the intercom. Alarms, sharp and piercing, immediately flared to life behind the scenes, echoing through the zoo's normally calm corridors. Zookeepers, their faces grim with a sudden panic, sprinted from the staff wing. Mr. Henderson, the senior administrator, cursed under his breath, his brow furrowed with a mixture of frustration and fear, as he frantically fumbled with the keys to the heavy service gate, his hands shaking slightly. But inside the lush, vibrant habitat, none of that chaotic urgency seemed to matter. The little boy, Leo, his small hands trembling almost imperceptibly, extended his arms. And the young gorilla, Koko, wrapped his own powerful, yet surprisingly gentle arms around him. It wasn't violent in the slightest. It wasn't wild or aggressive. It was a hug, tender and profound, elongated beyond the ordinary, his small, dark head resting heavily on Leo's slender shoulder. The child stood completely frozen, his eyes slowly, almost involuntarily, closing, as if an immense, suffocating weight that had burdened his young heart had suddenly, miraculously, lifted. His small hands, tentative at first, reached up and curled gently into Koko's soft, damp fur. By the time the initial team of frantic staff reached the very edge of the enclosure, their expressions were a mixture of disbelief and utter bewilderment. They were too stunned, too overwhelmed by the scene before them, to utter a single word. The gorilla, Koko, refused to let go, his grip unwavering, and the boy, Leo, who had been unnervingly silent since the very beginning of the field trip, now leaned his cheek into the gorilla's furry side, finding an inexplicable comfort there. Outside the nursery, other keepers, alerted by the alarms, gathered and stared, their bodies paralyzed by the extraordinary sight. No one dared to move a muscle. No one dared to interrupt the sacred, fragile moment. Because in that single, quiet, almost ethereal embrace, something invisible, something utterly profound, had passed between them. Something no one could quite name, but everyone, every single person watching, could undeniably feel. The young gorilla clung even tighter, pressing his face deeper against the boy's shoulder as the world around them, the world of human concern and protocol, began to spin into a controlled chaos. Keepers quickly surrounded the enclosure, their radios crackling with urgent updates, voices raised in a mix of panic and hurried instruction. Parents and teachers, alerted to the crisis, gathered frantically behind the outer fence, gasping in shock, some shouting Leo's name in desperate cries. Someone immediately called for emergency backup, requesting additional security and medical teams. Someone else fumbled with the bulky tranquilizer equipment, their movements hesitant, but still, no one made a move to intervene. Because despite everything they inherently knew about wild animals, about the unpredictability of nature, not a single soul could look at that impossibly tender hug and genuinely see danger. The boy's small hands curled deeper into the gorilla's damp, musky fur. His face, pale and solemn, rested against Koko's tiny, yet incredibly strong body. There were no tears, no desperate screams, just two lost souls, two fragile beings, locked together in an unspoken alliance against a metaphorical storm no one else could truly perceive or comprehend. Get the chief veterinarian and the senior animal behaviorist. Mr. Henderson barked urgently over the strained intercom, his voice tight with tension. A young volunteer, perhaps driven by pure instinct, began to inch closer with a rescue net, but Mr. Henderson held out a firm, unyielding hand, stopping her. "Wait," he said, his voice surprisingly soft but laced with an undeniable tremor. "Just wait." Inside the nursery, surrounded by the growing tension, time seemed to slow to an agonizing crawl. The little gorilla let out a low, rumbling purr, a sound almost like a cat's, a guttural vocalization of pure, unadulterated comfort. His arms, though still small and juvenile, held a surprising, unwavering strength that astonished everyone observing. The boy, Leo, hugged back with all the fierceness of a heart that had been holding too much bottled-up love, too much unexpressed sorrow, inside for far too long. And still, he said nothing. The staff watched, visibly torn between the rigid adherence to their extensive training and the raw, undeniable pull of their shared human instinct. Their rule books explicitly mandated immediate extraction. Protocols screamed, "Call animal control. Initiate tranquilization." But something about the powerful, raw sincerity of the scene before them made them hesitate. It made their own hearts ache with a strange, empathetic pain. This wasn't aggression. This wasn't fear. It was grief. Finding its own unexpected, profound reflection. The senior animal behaviorist, Dr. Eris Thorne, a seasoned expert with years of unparalleled experience, finally rushed into the control room, breathless and dripping from the unexpected rain, his glasses fogged. Staff immediately crowded around the bank of monitors, their eyes fixed on the live feed. The little boy and the young gorilla remained locked in their unwavering, almost spiritual embrace. Radios crackled relentlessly with a torrent of updates, conveying the urgency of the situation, but inside the nursery, in that small, contained world, absolutely nothing had changed. It was as if time itself, along with the immense weight of grief and memory, had miraculously stitched them together into one incredibly fragile, precious moment. Dr. Thorne leaned close to the reinforced glass, his gaze sharp and insightful, studying every minute detail. The gorilla's impossibly tight grip, the boy's trusting, almost serene stillness. "Something much deeper is happening here," he murmured, his voice low and contemplative. "This isn't just a chance encounter. This is a profound recognition." As the staff scrambled frantically for answers, a flood of records began to pour in from various departments. Details, stark and heartbreaking, began to emerge, forming a clearer, more devastating picture. The boy, Leo Sullivan, had been recently placed into the care of his aunt and uncle after a tragic and sudden accident had claimed the lives of both his parents. He had barely spoken a word since the incident, withdrawing almost entirely from his classmates, always clinging to an old, worn MP3 player, his constant companion, until this very day. Koko's file mirrored Leo's own profound loss. The young gorilla had been found clinging desperately to the lifeless body of his mother after their troop was violently raided by poachers in the remote forests of Central Africa. He had been smuggled, then miraculously rescued, and finally relocated to the zoo, a place that was supposed to be a safe haven. His adjustment to the new environment had been agonizingly slow, filled with a deep, persistent pain. He had clung to a trainer's arm for days, refusing food, stubbornly resisting any attempts at comfort, until now. Inside the tranquil habitat, Leo, with an innate gentleness, began to stroke Koko's back in a slow, rhythmic pattern. The gorilla, in response, closed his eyes, swaying almost imperceptibly with the motion, a low, contented rumble emanating from his chest. "It's not just comfort," Dr. Thorne stated, his voice barely above a whisper, "it's a shared memory, a shared echo of trauma. Two young lives, echoing the same devastating story, woven deeply into their very being." The chief zoo veterinarian, standing beside him, nodded gravely. Separation now could cause irreparable psychological trauma for both of them. "We need to think carefully, very carefully." The crowd outside the main entrance thickened rapidly. News cameras, drawn by the unfolding drama, began to arrive, their lenses glinting. But the keepers, instinctively understanding the gravity of the moment, shielded the view, forming a protective human wall around the habitat. "This is not a spectacle," Mr. Henderson declared, his voice firm, "this is something sacred." Hours stretched into an agonizing eternity. No progress was made. Attempts to lure the gorilla away with enticing food failed miserably. Even playing soothing music through hidden speakers had no discernible effect. The arrival of Koko's familiar trainer stirred no reaction from the young gorilla, he remained utterly unresponsive. Finally, Mr. Henderson, after a long, drawn-out sigh, made the unprecedented call. "We do this the boy's way," he announced, his voice imbued with a newfound resolve, on his terms. Carefully, a low, sturdy bench and a fresh water bottle were gently placed just inside the service gate, visible but non-threatening. These were familiar, comforting items. There would be no nets, no dart guns, just an immense, unwavering patience. Leo looked up once, his blue eyes wary, but made no move to disengage. Koko, sensing the subtle shift in the boy, clutched him even tighter, his little rumbling purr intensifying. The message remained starkly clear, not yet. And for now, the entire world seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting to see if trust alone, a bond forged in shared grief, could bridge a wound too deep for mere words. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a new idea sparked. Leo's aunt, who had been anxiously waiting with the zoo staff, approached Mr. Henderson, her voice hesitant. "Leo, he sings," she whispered, her eyes fixed on her nephew and Koko. "He's always sung. It's how he copes." Mr. Henderson's eyes widened slightly. It was unconventional, completely off protocol, but they were out of options. A wireless microphone, carefully sterilized and placed inside a protective casing, was lowered into the enclosure, resting gently near the bench. Leo hesitated. His aunt called out softly, encouraging him. He slowly reached for the microphone, his small fingers wrapping around the cool metal. Koko, feeling the slight shift in Leo's posture, lifted his head, his dark eyes fixed on the strange object in the boy's hand. Then, Leo began to hum. It was a soft, almost imperceptible melody at first, then it grew into a quiet, mournful tune. As the gentle notes filled the enclosure, Koko's entire body seemed to freeze. His intense gaze never left Leo's face. The rumble in his chest subsided, replaced by a profound stillness. He wasn't afraid, he was captivated. He pressed his head into Leo's shoulder, a deep, resonant sigh escaping him, almost like a human breath. It was a silence filled with pure, unadulterated awe. The boy continued to sing, his voice small but clear, filling the vast space, and the young gorilla remained utterly still, held captive by the simple, profound beauty of the sound. This was it. This was the breakthrough. Morning light crept over the zoo, a soft, golden glow cutting through the mist still clinging to the trees. The little boy, Leo, and the young gorilla, Koko, sat side by side, still wrapped together on the damp earth, their silhouettes soft and serene against the rising sun. Staff had taken turns watching overnight, a silent vigil, but no one had disturbed them. Not yet. Dr. Thorne, the animal behaviorist, spent the night crafting a new plan, incremental separation, a delicate dance of trust and patience. They allowed Leo's aunt and uncle, waiting anxiously nearby, to come to the outer fence each morning. They called gently to him, their voices soft, offering no sudden moves, no pressure, just presence. Meanwhile, familiar keepers cautiously approached Koko with offerings, fresh, ripe fruit, soft, comforting blankets, and a few of the toys he had once loved. At first, both the child and the gorilla resisted. Leo would turn his face away from the voices calling his name, a silent plea for solitude. The young gorilla would press his forehead harder against Leo's shoulder, grunting softly, a low, mournful sound of reluctance. But time, that quiet, relentless healer, possessed its own subtle magic. Each day, Leo would edge a little closer to the fence, his eyes still lingering on Koko, but responding to his aunt and uncle's gentle calls. Each day, the gorilla watched, uncertain but slowly, incrementally, trusting. One afternoon, when a keeper offered Koko a brightly colored yellow ball, the gorilla's ears perked up, a flicker of his old curiosity returning. His grip on Leo loosened just slightly, almost imperceptibly. Leo leaned back, blinking in confusion, perhaps surprised by the sudden shift. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, his hands fell naturally to his sides, and he smiled. It was a small smile, crooked and tentative, but it was a smile. A palpable tidal wave of hope surged through the watching staff, a collective breath held for days finally released. By the week's end, Koko allowed Leo to walk a few feet away without immediately following. He stayed close, always close, his eyes tracking the boy's every move, but the invisible tether between them, once so tight, began to lengthen, to strengthen, evolving into something more resilient. Their bond didn't break, it deepened, transforming. Leo began to talk again, his voice hesitant at first, whispering to Koko, then slowly, to the keepers. He told them about his parents, about the accident, about the haunting dreams that used to wake him crying in the dead of night. He confided things no therapist had ever heard, things that now poured out of him like rain after a long, parched drought. The gorilla listened, a silent, empathetic presence. Day after day, their supervised visits continued, structured and gentle, always ending with a quiet, mutual goodbye. Until one afternoon, something truly incredible happened. As Leo stood to leave, preparing for their daily separation, the young gorilla lifted his head, grunted softly, a low, contented sound, and didn't follow. He watched Leo with dark, knowing eyes, a profound understanding passing between them. Then, with a newfound confidence, he turned, toddling slowly back toward the cluster of juvenile gorillas, his true family. He let Leo go, and somehow, in that small, wordless goodbye, both of them stepped forward into a future neither had thought they would ever find again. Leo returned to the zoo 6 months later, his hand tucked securely into his adoptive aunt's. He was taller now, stronger, a hint of his old vibrant energy returning. His laughter, bright and unrestrained, echoed playfully down the pathways as he skipped toward the primate center, genuine excitement lighting up his face. Waiting for him inside the nursery, beyond the reinforced glass, was not just Koko, the young gorilla he had once clung to, but a brand new sight, a second orphan gorilla, recently introduced to the troop, a timid new addition. Koko, his old friend, now sat proudly near the new arrival, watching over him with the same quiet protectiveness he had once so tenderly offered to Leo. When Leo stepped up to the observation glass, Koko spotted him instantly. He rushed toward the barrier, his large, dark hand pressing against the clear wall, a gesture of profound recognition. Leo beamed, pressing his small palm to meet Koko's, a silent connection. There was no fear, no lingering sadness in his eyes, only pure, unadulterated joy. The keepers smiled from the sidelines, their hearts full. They knew exactly what they had witnessed, the full, miraculous circle of healing. Because Koko didn't just survive his trauma, he learned to love again, to connect, to protect. And Leo didn't just find a new family, he found his voice, his strength, and a profound understanding of compassion. That day, the zoo dedicated a small, unobtrusive plaque at the nursery's entrance. It read, "To the ones who find each other when the world tries to tear them apart." Visitors paused to read it, some blinking away silent tears, moved by the untold story. Inside, the young gorilla, Koko, now confidently climbed the ropes with his new companion, strong and free. Leo watched him with a knowing smile, his new parents standing proudly by his side, their faces filled with love and gratitude. And high above the leafy nursery, two tiny hands, one human, one primate, pressed briefly together across the glass. A silent promise, echoing through the air, "You are not alone. Not anymore." Sometimes, the most powerful connections are the ones we never see coming, the ones that defy explanation and reshape our understanding of compassion. A lost little boy, an orphaned gorilla, two broken hearts that found healing in each other's unexpected embrace. This story reminds us that love, trust, and hope can bloom even in the darkest, most challenging moments. And that sometimes, family isn't just defined by who you're born to, it's about who finds you, who understands you, when you need it the most. If this incredible story touched your heart, please don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more uplifting true stories that showcase the profound strength of compassion across all walks of life, across all species. Have you ever witnessed a bond between humans and animals that left you completely speechless? Share your own extraordinary experiences in the comments below. We would absolutely love to hear your story. Thank you for watching. Stay kind, stay hopeful, and always remember, sometimes, the smallest gestures can truly change the world.